Welcome to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spera. Today, our guest, Dr. Valerie Scola, who practices in Murrieta, California. She's got a great story, great beginnings, where she came from, where she got to, and she, as of January 2024, will be 100% out of network. And it's been a long journey for her, including some financial challenges along the way, and a big drop in the practice that she purchased, and a discovery of things that she didn't expect, among other things. It's really a fascinating story. Our podcast today, as always, is sponsored by Kettenbach. Kettenbach's got a new product called Profacil, and it's very excited to announce this as a major advancement in fluoride varnish treatments. No longer any alcohol or resin. Instead, patients will want the new treatment delivered by a muco-adhesive dimethicone gel called Profacil. It leaves a smooth, silky, lubricious feel. No more grit. Contact Kettenbach today for more details and do more varnishes that patients will appreciate. Call 877-532-2123 or visit kettenbachusa.com. Folks, like the podcast, share it with your friends. If you don't like it, well, contact me, please, directly, sonnyspera@gmail.com or 607-624-2962 is where you can reach me. Hope you enjoy this one. It's a good one. We will have a second part to this in a very short time in the year 2024. Stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. Today's guest, Dr. Valerie Scola. I saw her put a post up and I said, this would be a really interesting conversation and guest. And so I stalked her and she agreed. So it's always a good technique. All right, let me give you a little background. Dr. Valerie Scola grew up in Elkhart, Indiana in a dental family. She worked alongside her mom in her front office during high school, and college. Her father practiced dentistry for 35 years plus. Here, Dr. Scola earned her BS in Marketing and B.A. in Spanish from Butler University in Indianapolis. Cool school. After living in the San Francisco Bay Area for 6 years, she returned to Indiana to pursue a career in dentistry. She attended IU Dental School, which is Indiana, graduated in 2011 with her DDS degree, and she joined her father in practice for a short time before the cold winters and the weakened economy led her and her husband and 4 kids back to California. They settled in Murrieta, California. After a year in a DSO, Dr. Scola knew the corporate model wasn't for her. She purchased her practice in January 2014, and in 2015 was honored to be selected in Incisal Edge Magazine Top 40 Dentists Under 40. She was featured again in 2016 for an article about her 1965 Mustang Fastback, and in 2018 after speaking on a panel for the Lucy Hobbs Project honoring women in dentistry. 2017, she enrolled in the Essentials 1 course at the Pankey Institute. The experience changed her life and set the tone of the future of her office. She continued Pankey Curriculum TMD course, making a plan to free herself from insurance dependence. In January 2024, she will be officially out of network with all plans, just in time for her 10-year anniversary of practice ownership. Very active in her community, she still drives her 65 Mustang every chance she gets. Spends free time with her husband, Austin, their 4 children, Lila, 18, Vincent, 16, Helena, 14, Estella, 12, and they're active in the church and involved in a variety of sports. She can also be found on the softball field, of course, as scorekeeper and team mom. So please welcome Dr. Valerie Scola. Valerie, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad we got this together. We're recording this after she spent her time doing her softball scorekeeping today. So glad that you had the time to fit this all in. So you went to Butler University. When did you graduate?
I graduated in 2000.
2000. Okay. So what did you do? What did you do prior to going back into the dental school thing?
So I moved shortly after I graduated. My senior year, I had an internship at Delta Faucet Company, which is in Indianapolis, and ended up meeting a sales rep during this 3-day sales training that I helped organize and coordinate. And 5 months later, I moved to the Bay Area because that's where he was from. And so that is my now husband. So graduated in May, moved in September of 2000, and I got a job at Sunset Magazine, which growing up in the Midwest, I had never heard of, but very well known on the West Coast. And I worked in the circulation department, and I worked on insert cards and renewal notices and our donor gift campaign and things like that. But decided, it was a great first job out of college, and it was a wonderful place to work, beautiful facility because they have amazing gardens.
What did you major in college? What was your college major?
Marketing and Spanish. So I studied abroad in Spain for a semester. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I read that. I'm sorry. So marketing, that's pretty broad. Yeah. Okay.
Very broad.
So, okay. So marketing, sales, that makes sense. You can kind of see that pathway. And growing up, your dad being a dentist and working with your mom, and mom worked in the office. So you had to have a lot of conversations in the house about dental field, dental industry. What was that like growing up?
It's funny because I did spend most of the time up front with my mom, and I didn't really think, at the time, I didn't really consider being a dentist. I just knew we had a pretty flexible schedule. My mom ran the office for my dad. He was really active in the community. We got to participate in a lot of things. But he worked Monday through Thursday, and having my mom, it really, balanced things out really well. So I think what I didn't realize is that it did kind of come naturally. I thought it was normal to talk about teeth and talk about dentistry, and for my friends to ask, what I thought about their braces, or, ask me questions about teeth. And in school, it was always, if I had a speech to give, it was how to brush your teeth or how to floss or why you should visit your dentist every 6 months. Those things all just seemed really normal and natural and interesting. But it wasn't until later working at Sunset and living in California that I just didn't see myself behind my boss's desk. And my husband is the one that said, gosh, I think it was kind of sad that you or your brother never went into dentistry. And I never thought about that. I just thought I wanted to go a business route, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do all these things. So that Christmas we flew home, and I shadowed my dad and kind of hung out with the assistants in the back, and just saw it with fresh eyes, and just totally fell in love with it and thought, I could definitely do this. So had to go back to school. Ended up quitting my job at Sunset and worked part-time. We got married and in 2003, and that fall, I went back to school and just started chipping away at all those science prereqs that I didn't take.
Yeah, when did you go?
Around, and
when did you go back to school? When did you go back to school for?
So 2003, fall of 2003, I went back to Cal State. It's now Cal State East Bay, up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And, yeah, worked.
So your path was not. So people understand, right? Your path was not straight. It was not a straight linear path, right?
Oh, no.
It's fascinating. It's interesting. So at this point, when you go back to school, do you have children at this point?
Not yet. So we got married 4th of July, 2003, and then I started back in September of 2003.
Okay.
And then I had my first daughter in 2005. April of 2005.
How much time did you spend? Sorry, how much time did you spend going back to get your prereqs done?
It took me 3 years.
Okay.
To go through. It was on a quarter system. I was working part-time. My husband was working full-time. Got pregnant. I mean, we planned it, but got pregnant with her. So, it took me about a full 3 years.
Okay.
To finish all of that.
So you start dental school 2007?
Yes.
Okay, and you have one child at that point?
Before I started.
Okay, I was going to say, somewhere around there you're having to say, okay, so let's take everything, let's pack it all in. Wow. So when did you move back to Indiana? Did you move back around that time, 2007?
No, we actually moved back in 2006.
Okay.
And I had to push off taking the DAT, and because I had my daughter, and so I took, a little bit of time, and so I didn't take it until August, and so it kind of delayed the application process. But we knew that we wanted to go back to Indiana. I applied a few other places, but we knew we wanted to return so that I could eventually join my dad. So I interviewed in February of 2006, but I was waitlisted. And so we just went ahead and moved back that following summer. And I worked in his office as an assistant, and
Okay.
that was what we did for the whole next year, which helped because then I could reestablish residency. And so then when I reapplied, I got in right away and was considered an in-state student. So that helped.
So you really got tested. You really got tested to see if you really wanted to do this. You had to jump through a few hoops. Well, good for you. So you start in dental school. Now, while you're in dental school, did you have any thoughts that, maybe I'll, specialize, or I like what my dad does, or what were your thoughts there?
I don't know that I really thought I would specialize. If anything, maybe pediatrics. I mean, I always liked working with kids. But honestly, at that point, I mean, I was always a good student, did really well, high school, college, even aside from OChem, I did really well, doing all my prereqs. But getting into dental school, it was a whole different ball game. And I mean, a part of it was the fact that I had a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old, and it just felt like nothing, the material itself wasn't difficult. It was just coming at such a fast pace.
Yeah.
It was just like drinking through a fire hose, And so
that's my favorite expression right there.
Getting my schedule, coordinated. So, I mean, at that first semester, especially in that first year, it was like, okay, I just want to get through and do well.
You had to be super fantastic at your time management skills, because all that you have on your plate in your personal life, and now all that you have on your plate with the sheer volume of material that we all went through, very hard. I mean, I know what I had. I know what I had on my plate, and I didn't have any of that stuff at home. I just had a roommate. and I went to class. I mean, I coached basketball. That was the one thing that did take up some of my time during dental school. But, for the most part, I wasn't caring for a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old.
Yeah, well, and I was really lucky because my husband was so supportive. I mean, these were things that we talked about ahead of time, and decisions that we made together. And he was home during the day with them, and he worked nights out at FedEx at the airport. And we just we just tag teamed, and we knew what our end goals were. And I think everybody has something that can distract them or, take them away from things. And for us, it was raising a family. Like, I didn't have time to mess around, It was definitely pulling double duty.
And you had another child while you were in dental school, right?
Yeah. Yep. Between second and third year. So I took my Part 1 boards early. I took them in March because I was due with her in July. So then I could just start clinic right away. And so while most people were studying for boards, I was already, up in the clinic working. I think I freaked a lot of the faculty out, because I was there till like full 9 months. They were always worried I was going to, give birth right there in the clinic. But so I had my third between second and third year, and it took about, maybe a month, 3 weeks or a month to stay home with her and then get right back into it.
Okay. All right. So you finished dental school and you had your fourth baby fairly soon?
Yeah, 3 weeks after I graduated.
When it rains, it pours. That's
3 weeks after and I still graduated on time. That's why I'm here to say, like, you can do it,
Yeah,
to all those people out there. And my husband laughs because he says that I set a precedent and I made it look easy. And then it was like I was the, one of the first ones. And then suddenly over the next couple of years, suddenly all these women are having babies. And like,
well, there you go.
Okay, so it looks so easy, but you can do it.
So when you graduate, you go right to work for your dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I had her in June, and then I started with him in August. We moved back up to Elkhart. Yeah, but we already knew by that time that we were not going to stay forever.
Right.
So early on, basically the second winter in, halfway through my first year, my husband said, I know this was our plan, but the winters were just killing him. And he said, I just can't do it forever. So we had to talk to my parents about that, and just, he was willing to stay through school, even like 5 years later. We had talked about paying off school loans. But, the economy hadn't really turned quite yet. He just knew, like, we're going to need to switch gears here. So,
okay. All right. So when you're working for your dad, talk about this. Did you see... Now, okay, you're working on your skills, but now did you all of a sudden start looking at the business part of the practice completely differently? What did you take in during that short internship with him?
Well, I don't feel like I had, it was kind of a rude awakening, honestly, for all of us, because in Elkhart, the main industries are like RV and van conversions. And so they had been hit really hard during that time. And a lot of dentists had to close their doors.
Wow.
And luckily my dad didn't, but they had definitely had a decrease year over year in production. And all of us, we didn't really plan very well for me to come in and join the practice. And so they were automatically paying me a salary because I had the 4 kids and was the main breadwinner. But they didn't necessarily have the production anymore to support both of us. And my grandpa got sick that year. And so my dad was gone a lot, down visiting him and kind of taking care of him. And I just couldn't produce that much to keep both of us afloat. And so it started, like, financially, it started to take its toll. And by the end of the year, we had to have some really serious conversations about what was going to happen. And they had a great staff, and had already made some like wage adjustments like throughout the recession. And so a lot of just late nights, and we decided that I should leave the practice. And so that was hard. I mean,
there's so many strings attached here. It's not just a job. It's family. It's
right.
Your dad, probably your hero.
Right. And the fact that we weren't going to stay forever, I think if the plan was still for me to take over, I feel like we would have made different decisions, or we would have figured out how to make it work. But it was kind of just an easy solution to, say, like, I'll step aside.
Did your dad still practice?
At that time, we had an opportunity where my husband had a friend who they were hiring, and so we thought, well, maybe this is our opportunity. We were going to stay longer, but maybe now's the time, and this is going to open the door.
Is your dad?
So we started looking into that, but I had already, taken boards and I had taken the NERB because we thought we were going to stay for 5 years. So I had to retake boards, like travel with patients down to Louisville, like get relicensed. I mean, it took a little while.
Yeah, I'm part of that NERBS. That's what my deal was, in Northeast Regional Boards, and they only cover so many states. And unlike medicine, we still can't figure out in dentistry.
California wasn't one of them.
Yeah, we can't figure out in dentistry that a tooth in California is the same as a tooth in Ohio, or the same as a tooth in Virginia or Florida or wherever. Yeah. Oh my God, it's so backwards. Anyway, so now you got to relocate. You got to go through the whole board process. You got 4 children. One's fairly young still. You got to break ties. Okay. So now you go out there and you join a practice. And how did that work? How did you find that practice, first of all?
Well, I honestly reached out to a classmate of mine who was from San Diego and asked her, where are you working? Who do you know? And how did you get a job? And she was with PDS.
Okay.
Which I didn't know a lot about.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just started applying all over the place, honestly. And I flew out a couple of times. It took a while to get my license, and so I missed out on a couple of opportunities, different places for working interviews because I didn't have it yet. So finally got that, and we decided to move. We decided to look at San Diego because we knew we didn't want to go back to the Bay Area. It was still hard to find an associateship that would be full-time at that time as well. And my husband really didn't want to live in the East Bay or Sacramento or something. So and my sister-in-law lived in San Diego. So we thought, all right, let's look around San Diego. And opportunities came about with PDS. And so I went through all the different phone interviews. And that's where she was working, and she seemed to be happy. She seemed to be fine. So I flew out for a couple different interviews, and then there were opportunities in Temecula and Murrieta, which is where we ended up, which is just about an hour north of San Diego. And man, that first working interview, like the writing was on the wall. I kind of knew, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for me. I didn't really, and I'll be honest, I didn't understand a lot about the differences in insurance because my dad didn't deal with that. I mean, they just didn't, they would file insurance. I helped my mom up front for years,
Mm-hmm.
filing claims and chasing down claims and all of that, but they were always out of network. So it was very simplistic back then.
Yeah. Working
So
interviews.
having to upsell people.
Working interviews. We don't want to have that conversation. I think those are the worst thing that a dentist can do personally as an employer. I think it's borderline unethical. I think
Yeah.
it's the worst model that people use. But anyway, so you take the job, you go in there, and you're actually practicing very close to where you are now, correct?
Very
Okay.
close. I mean, we
So,
stayed in the area. Yeah.
so what was it like when you started? What was your experiences then? Now going from, okay, I was working in Indiana, and now I'm working here. What did you see? You started talking a little about the insurance differences, but what about the climate or the culture and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was, so, I mean, let me back up for a second. I did, after I left my dad's office, I ended up getting hired on at a primarily Medicaid-based clinic about a half
Mm-hmm.
hour away in Mishawaka near South Bend. Go Irish. And I got really comfortable with working on kids at that time because it
Okay.
was about 85% kids, but it
So change your skill set. Okay.
Medicaid based, and then
Yeah.
and you'd have a handful of, uh, private pay or
Sure.
insurance based, but I was just an associate, so I wasn't in charge of any of that type of stuff. But that was a really eye-opening experience because it was just a completely different socioeconomic background altogether, and not really what I was seeing in my dad's office. So I got a lot of experience with that. So then working at the DSO, they had me between two different offices, and it was just, I mean, as you are familiar with, I mean, it's just whatever came in your schedule, like you need to convert it. Everything was today. And it's very much, what can they finance? What can you qualify for? And if the patient wants to stay, then you better believe you're staying. And so I just felt like torn because I really wanted to provide great patient care. And I saw the example in my dad with the relationships that he built with people. And it was very hard to do that because you had to be in three places at once, and it was like I almost never got a lunch, worked late every night. They didn't know when to expect me home, and the kids were really young, 1 to 7 when we moved out. And so it was hard. It really took its toll on me. And then just the pressure, because I could do the same work one day and get paid one amount, and do, as I did the next day and get paid a totally different amount just based on whatever the insurance was.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I was in marketing, I never enjoyed sales. It just felt like too much pressure. And just the constant reminders, like when the oral surgeon was coming in, oh, hey, look for wisdom teeth, look for extractions. We got the oral surgeon coming in. Oh, we got the endodontist coming in. Look for this, look for that. I'm thinking, like, I'm not making up treatment just because you have this specialist coming in. What they need is what they need. So that was a struggle. And then being between both offices, I learned later that, because sometimes I would schedule people on a different day. And if I was in another office and the production was low, they would actually call my patients and try to make a deal for them to come be seen just to boost the production that day. If you come in today, we'll take 10% off. And it was patients who told me that later. They called me. Like, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So they were fine with, just kind of, undercutting what you were doing, but then holding you accountable to like meet these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And push treatment, and I
Okay.
was miserable. I mean, I wanted to quit dentistry, honestly.
Okay. So at what point do you move on? When do you buy, or when do you move into your own practice? What's next?
Yeah, probably, I would say probably within 6 months, my husband and I were talking about that, and he said, you know, you wanted to work for yourself anyway. If you're going to be working this hard, you may as well be working for yourself, because it's just going into their pockets, and you're miserable, you know. So let's start looking. At first, like very loosely, we were kind of looking for an associateship, but and I got connected actually with an orthodontist who happened to do his ortho residency at IU, and it was through the orthodontist at PDS, and she was working part-time in his office, and we would commiserate. You know, we didn't we just bonded over how much we, you know, hated it there, really. And so she got me in touch with him, and just having that IU connection, great. I mean, just he's a great guy. But I met with him to find out, hey, do you know, like, who are some good dentists in the area?
Yeah, give me some input on. Yeah, yeah. Lay of the land. Who might be our retirement age?
Names, like, well,
yeah.
Yep, he gave me names of people who, like, well, I don't know anybody in particular, but here's who I trust, or here's people who might be looking. And that didn't pan out, but at least started getting me more familiar with other people in the community. And we ended up, you know, getting pre-qualified, we were looking all over the state, honestly. We were even considering, like, do we go back to Indiana for a while? But we knew we wouldn't stay, you know, so that didn't really make a lot of sense. We looked all different practices, and then had looked pretty seriously at one that was right down the road from where we lived. But the wife, they were selling the practice and the business at the time, and the wife was an attorney, and she absolutely would not give up any of the financials unless we made a full price offer. And so we tried working, and they lost out. That is so
ridiculous.
I mean, at least 4 buyers.
It's like, listen, you want to buy my house? Sure. What kind of? Well, I don't want to tell you how many bedrooms we have. I don't want to tell you anything. You got a contract to buy it. Holy cow! I've never heard of that in my life. That is so bass backwards. It's not even funny.
It was crazy.
So is that what you did?
It was crazy, and it was too bad because he was a really nice guy and a great dentist, and she ruined it for him for years. I think it took him another 2 years to sell because we backed out too. We're like, this is crazy. You know, we're not going to agree to that.
Yeah, there's an attorney.
But in doing all of that.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said there's an attorney who stepped way over the line. So this education. So the education you get here gives you a little more confidence to go out and buy something, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, my husband, I mean, he is like the driving force behind so much of this. I mean, he's a go-getter. He's a great negotiator. He really kind of boosted my sales, you know, to go like, we can do this, you know, you can do this. I believe in you. And so in just connecting with all these different people, when my practice came up for sale, the broker called right away and said, I think this is perfect for you. This is what you're looking for. Met with her, and I mean, right away, it seemed like, yeah, this is it. You know, just talking to her, the way she treated the patients, it just felt so familiar. It felt a lot more.
Question about your broker. Was your broker a buyer broker, or was the broker the listing broker?
It was the lender who got me in touch with the buyer broker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was who it was. And then they handled, and then we kind of hired our own team of people to review everything. Although even that, like,
do you want to share what it looked like, what you purchased, like what the practice looked like, any of the numbers or anything like that, if you're comfortable?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Because I feel like I got in over my head, honestly. So she was young. She was only about 45 or 46 at the time, and was having some health issues, and kind of wanted to, I mean, even said to me, like, she kind of wanted to go hard for about 10 years and then retire early. And she really doubled the size of the practice when she took it over, which was, I think, 2001. They didn't have much of a perio program at the time. She brought in a periodontist. He actually is still with me today. But she was doing, I bought it for 1.4, and she was doing anywhere between like 1.4 and 1.6 a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she was a dynamo, honestly. And I think the appearance seemed a lot like my dad's practice, but once I got in, you could tell that she couldn't quite keep up with the work either at the end of it all. I think early on she started out great, but
how long did she stay with you? How long did she stay?
She was supposed to stay to complete cases. She stayed about 2 days. And that was it. And it was all a surprise. It was not really handled well, especially as young as she was. It shocked the patients. We told the staff, like, the day of, basically she said, okay, I'll talk to them first. Why don't you meet me at, such and such time that day? It was like a Tuesday. And January 7th, 2014, because the periodontist was there that Monday. And it was a shock. I mean, it was a total shock. And then she came in twice over the next week to do a couple of cases, and then was like, I don't think I need to be here anymore. You got it.
Okay. Wow.
So just talking to the staff, talking to all the patients.
So now you got the whole thing. Yeah. You got the whole debt. You got the whole burden. Everything's on your shoulders. You barely know anybody. You haven't had a chance to build any relationships with any of the team, let alone the patients. So walk us through the first year, 6 months, whatever. What was your biggest challenge now in the next 6 months?
Yeah, so keeping up, just them getting to know me in general. You got to slow way down to earn that trust with people. And quite frankly, I just didn't work as fast as she did. I mean, I just couldn't keep that pace and still do quality dentistry. So I needed a little bit of breathing room. But what also really kind of complicated things significantly is that pretty soon I've got a lot of, unfinished treatment from her, and open margins, sensitivity.
Yeah. Remember, how long did your negotiations go? Did it go 3 or 4 months?
With dealing with that?
No, when you were buying the practice, from the time that you started looking at it to the time that you actually had it.
Yeah, so it was the very end of October that we met, and then we decided that we would have it start at the beginning of the year.
So she knows. It out. So she knows that literally, as soon as this deal is written, I'm out the door. So to me, it's also like when you have an employee who's like, listen, I'm leaving. They've already left. Mentally they've checked out. And we've seen that with certain dentists that retire.
2 weeks at that point.
Yeah, so she retired in October.
I was completely naive.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely naive. And I remember my attorney at the time, because her husband was a dentist, and she's like, hey, these numbers, there's just some red flags here. with some of this stuff. But I felt like, well,
Okay. But still,
like, what's our worst case scenario? And
right. And look
but
where you
within
are
a
now.
month, I was contacting her again.
Yeah, but look where you are now, right? You wouldn't be where you are now
Hey,
if you didn't make it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot to clean up in the beginning, and I contacted the attorney within a month, and I was like, hey, what was that part about redo work in my contract? She goes, oh, geez, how bad is it? Like, I mean, half my day is spent dealing with this stuff for finishing work, and so we went back and forth for about a year. There were things that, a list was never given of the unfinished treatment. I probably could have sued for breach of contract, but I didn't want negative press.
Yeah,
It's like, you know what? It's done. Let's just finish up. I just want to be done with it.
That was the toll that you had to pay for your independence, right? And you have to look at it that way. The tax, the toll, whatever it is,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. But patients never knew what was going on, and thankfully we actually ended up reconciling about a year later, and met for lunch for years until she moved away, and she wished me well, and I mean, you just, like, life's too short.
Well, she never made good on it, right? She never made good on it. You just forgave her.
She came in and finished work. Right. She came in and she ended up working for about 4 months, completing redo work and finishing work.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's legit.
Yeah, we did work that out. Yep.
But work that out. That's pretty trusting on your part to ask her to redo work that was done poorly. What makes you believe she's going to do it right this time? That's pretty big leap of faith.
That's a good question, but I mean, I was in there at that point.
Yeah, it's a big leap of faith.
I think she knew I wasn't going to leave her alone.
What does the office look like? How many rooms? How many team members? What did you end up getting?
So it's 5 ops, and she had 2 hygienists at the time. One was 4 days a week. One was about 2.5, a little over 2. She worked like 2 8s and 1 6. And she had 3 assistants and 2 front office. But I think she had just let a 3rd front office go because they came at me immediately wanting raises, and she promised me this, and what about that? So it's like I felt like I was getting it from both sides, Yeah.
You got duped. Yeah.
It was a lot. It was a lot to handle. I felt overwhelmed, and those are the times that I wish I had more of my husband's personality. Like, he worked for at one time he worked for a termite and pest control company up in the Bay Area, and he was in charge of the construction side. And I mean, he had like 40 subcontractors under him. Like, he had no issue, moving those pieces around and managing people. And I was way more complacent. Like, I just want everybody to like me. We all know what we're doing here. I don't need to tell them what to do.
Typical dentist.
And they ran roughshod.
Yeah, typical dentist.
I mean, they totally.
Right, yeah. But your primary goal. But your primary goal is to get to know those patients because that's what you bought, and you want them to like you, so they establish a relationship. There's nothing inherently, bad about that whole process. But now you got to put on your business hat, right? And you got to be right with everything, and you can't really let out some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes with the prior doctor. That's just not going to go well for anybody. So yeah, you have a lot that you have to handle. So the first year sort of wraps up. So I'm gonna assume that you get a little bit of the cleansing, and she helps clean up some of her messes. You start to establish relationships. Then at what point? Oh, okay. So it wasn't until 2017 that you took the Pankey course. So this is 2014. Right. Okay. So talk about between 2014 and 2017. What are you seeing as you're getting really ingrained in the practice, what are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of how the business runs?
Well, in hindsight, again, I think I overbought. I was kind of in over my head a little bit. Plus, again, her being 1 foot out the door, she didn't have a pano. A bunch of the hand pieces needed to be replaced. Suddenly it was a money pit. And I also got starry-eyed and thought, oh, well, the periodontist, he's not, placing implants yet. So if I get a cone beam, then that will allow him to be doing more. And so immediately I took on this huge loan for that, replaced a bunch of hand pieces, replaced cameras, just everything that was starting to fall apart. And I found myself in debt in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
In debt, and I let go of one of the assistants right away. But then I had an opportunity where one of the assistants that used to work for my dad, she actually moved out here and started working for me. But foolishly, and then somebody else had to go on medical leave for a while. And so then somebody comes in to cover for her. Well, I was, had no backbone and just felt like, well, I'll just keep them all, and I had way too many people. I tried moving one of them to the front to help out in the front. It was just, I just had no direction and no control really, and started to get into real financial trouble. And the consultant that I had at the time also was clearly in over his head and not really, and he was from Indiana and kind of doing this remotely and would come out and visit, and it's like, oh, we're almost there, because I was still producing, and I did make, my strength is relationships for sure with the patients.
Mm-hmm.
But I also when I had to get recredentialed, I had to get in with Delta PPO and Premier, and she was Premier only. So she was in with maybe 7 plans, and suddenly, my crown fee drops immediately because of the PPO. And there's all these umbrella policies, and before I knew it, I'm in with 25 different plans without even intentionally wanting to be. So I've got way too much staff. I'm paying out through the nose in payroll, getting paid peanuts from these plans, and running, all the rooms, and just on roller skates, trying to get it done. And I was burnt out in a hurry. And so the consultant was trying to say well, maybe you guys should, and we bought a house 6 months into ownership, we decided to buy a house as well. And he's saying well, maybe you could take a second mortgage out on the house. And I started talking to my husband, and he, pumped the brakes on that in a hurry and was like, this stops now. Okay. Tell me everything, because I kept thinking, I can get it on track. If I just do more, it's going to be okay. And it wasn't okay. And I was,
at this point, what is the practice producing?
Gross was still just over $1 million, but with the write-offs and everything, I want to say 800.
Oh, so no, it was. So forget producing. Let's talk about real numbers. So you're now in half of the value of the practice that you had, and the reason she had all those people is because she was running around like crazy, right? And that's not your style. Yep. Okay, so all right. So at some point, you got to have an epiphany. Then I got to believe.
Yeah.
What does
and
that
part
look
of it,
like?
thankfully, was my husband going, this stops now. And so we actually, so it was him, and then it was also me being involved in a study club. So early on in the first year, I happened to go to some business function that the bank was putting on, and I met an endodontist there, and he invited me to this study club. And lo and behold, the orthodontist who I had known prior is in the same study club. So it was just like immediate connection with people and starting to look at more comprehensive care and how to balance some of these things out, and hear other people who had a lot more experience, even ones who went, we just had to let go of a hygienist who was with us for 13 years and it was really hard, but here's why. And knowing they weren't all fee for service, but maybe a few plans, but also just similar type care, so being able to plug into that also really helped significantly. And then my husband started researching other consultants, other different programs to see, okay, is this going to help? How do we clean this up? And we ended up hiring on a different practice management group, and they really helped put more systems in place. And they had a coaching component and a consulting component. I was with them for about a year, and it really started to, we didn't like erase it completely, but it really started to steer things in a much better direction. I had a couple people leave. I was still overstaffed, honestly, even then, but we were producing more. Patients were trusting. I definitely was gaining new patients. I was involved in different things in the community, just meeting people. And so I wasn't having an issue with bringing new patients in. But it was the insurance plans too. I mean, I started to see, okay, I'm producing more and I'm booked out, but I'm writing most of it off. It's not really helping.
Right.
But we continued on and just kind of stayed afloat, for most of 2016. And then in 2017, so we did a Pankey study group, like the learning groups, through my study club. And so then that was how I was originally introduced to Pankey. And I really feel like it was the study club too that kind of spurred me on, because I was one of the newer ones at the time. And so the oral surgeon that in 2016, he had a big fundraiser on Veterans Day for the military and all kinds of different auction items. And so Pankey auctioned off the Essentials 1 course. It was like, oh my gosh, I want to win this. My husband and I were like, you need to go to this. You need this extra training. And so I put down my bid of, $1,000, which was still a lot of money for us at that time. And because my husband was just staying at home. I mean, he wasn't working. Like, this was all me. And nobody else bid on it. They were like, we're letting Val have that, and I'm sure Pankey probably didn't love the fact that it was only $1,000. Honestly, no, they welcomed me with open arms. And so that next year in 2017, I went to E1, and I mean, that's all I can say. It was just life-changing. It was like, because it's more than teeth.
Okay, so
teeth. It's balancing work and life.
Let me ask you a couple questions. I know there's a slight delay in the timing, so let me ask you a couple questions. When you bought the practice, she was doing about 1.4, 1.6. What was her net, or what was her overhead percentage then?
So interestingly, she was probably doing even more, because what we found out is that she was just billing out the adjusted fee. And so she was, close to like 98%.
No. What was she? So if she's billing 1.6, what was her take home? Like, what was the overhead percent?
Yeah, she was still bringing home. She was still collecting most of that.
Okay. But
because she was billing on the adjusted. So we realized after the fact she was probably doing $2 million.
It doesn't really matter. No, yeah, no, I'm saying when you look at her profit and loss statement, right?
Oh.
What was her net? Because I got to believe that when your production and your numbers go to half, your overhead has to be in the 70-80% now.
Yes. So her overhead was only probably 50%.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a huge difference in buying a practice that gives you $800,000 of money to now you've run it for a bit, you've had your challenges, and now the practice is doing half of the overhead, half of the gross numbers, and your take home is even less because of this huge increase in your overhead percent. So if you don't get that Pankey class for $1,000, it probably would have been too steep a cost to go into on your own. So you do that, it's a blessing. And then when you come back, let's not talk so much about Pankey, but let's talk about the changes you're going to make to your practice. When do you decide to say, all right, I'm dropping insurances and here's how I'm going to do it?
Yeah, so honestly, it was shortly after that. It was realizing I can't do what I want to do in this environment. And so I came back and we started looking at the plans and, you know, like you mentioned before, like what's the low hanging fruit? You know, so we started going, okay, well, who's paying what and how many people are in those plans? And we immediately just started axing, you know, some of them maybe I had 20 people, you know, it was next to nothing. One of the big ones that we dropped right away, which I felt bad about at the time, was United Concordia and TRICARE, because it was military and there are a lot of military people, but it was paying 40% of my fees even then. It was just a no-go. I mean, it was just completely losing money. So we dropped that and we started dropping some of the other smaller ones. And then and we would talk with patients. We would actually talk with patients about that and what that meant, and just start helping them to understand, you know, dental insurance isn't like medical insurance. It's the reverse. It's more like a coupon book, you know, and explaining the differences. And the challenges in that, but hey, we're still going to bill your insurance. You can still use it, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, like the first couple of years, I didn't really notice a huge difference in my numbers. I'm sure I had some patients leave, but it wasn't a significant amount. So we felt like, all right, we can still do this. But my hope was one day I want to be able to drop Delta, because I knew that was my biggest nut, because I had all the teachers and administrators, school administrators, police and fire. Like it was just, I mean, as with many people, like it was huge. It was a big part of the practice. And so we kind of whittled it down.
When did you make the decision to axe Delta? When was that? That was probably the last plan you dropped?
Well, so I had some staff change over and slowly got some better people in place over the years too. And we had kind of whittled things down to about 5 plans, and then COVID hit. And I felt like, okay, this is my chance. I had furloughed my team. I had kept my patient care coordinator. It was just, you know, the two of us in the office every day. I think that's when I discovered the Fee for Service podcast, amongst other, you know, different resources. We became a, you know, CE, even more of a CE junkie. And it's like we couldn't do enough, you know, webinars at that time. And I thought, this is it. If I'm going to have to see half the patients, I darn well better be getting paid a fair fee for it. And so we, in May of 2020, We sent the letter to Delta, and then I got cold feet, and they came back with, oh, you can keep Premier if you want, and we'll still send the checks to you. And that felt easier. I just was, and in hindsight, I wish I would have just pulled the plug at that time. I wish I wouldn't, because my full team came back after COVID. And in hindsight, I wish I would have just done it, in one fell swoop, and then not have brought everybody back and then built slowly from there. But that's not what I did. I dropped PPO, not Premier. I had a couple more left. That next year, we got out with all the rest of them, but we held on to Premier. And kind of just backfilled. I definitely lost patience. Number one, we didn't handle it well because I just did it. And then we would talk to them as they came back in. And I didn't do it one-to-one myself. And I also, my patient care coordinator is phenomenal. And she explains things so well to people, but we had moved her into a different role. And so after a while, she had someone who was totally new to dentistry explaining this to the patients, and shame on us for thinking that it was going to, go well. It was nothing but confusion for a lot of people. And I fully believe that I probably could have kept a lot more people than I did had we handled that better as well.
Let me ask you this.
So
what did your numbers look like at this point? Because you said you've cleansed yourself down to 5 plans, and you dropped, at this point, you move out of 4, and you change Delta from PPO to just Premier. You had to see a slow, steady increase in that overall practice number, and you had to see a slight decrease in your overhead.
Yes, slight. Because then I decided to purchase the mill, in 2021. So suddenly I've got a loan again. I paid off the cone beam, and now I've got another loan. So little things, but it was definitely much more comfortable, much more profitable. Numbers were increasing. We were climbing up into the high 900s by that time, just inching so close. And then finally in 2022, end of 2022, we crossed over and it collected just over $1 million. So, I was scraping and clawing to get to that point, because I think that first and second year, maybe we're at 750, 780, it was a huge drop. It was colossal. So it took a while to get up to that.
Don't you think those early victories gave you a little momentum in conversations moving forward, that it's going to be okay, right? And your mindset, you clearly described it, your mindset changed. You said, I am not going to do this at this point for this amount. Not. And I think that's key. Once you have that mentality, you're never going back, and you're going to burn the boats, as the saying goes, then the rest of it becomes now just a sort of a math exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And by the end of 2022, I said to my team, okay, this year is going to be the transition year. That's going to be, we're going to take a year, and that's okay. We're going to assess this. We're going to start talking to people right out of the gate. We're going to give them ample amount of time to really process what's going to happen, and we're going to hold their hand through it. And that's what we've done. And the early conversations were more, we're thinking about doing this, and just kind of getting feedback. You don't have to decide today, but if you did, what do you think? What are your concerns? Would you stay? Would you go? And just kind of had a scientific survey of what's the response. from people. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And then right around May, we got serious about, okay, let's dig a little deeper and look at these numbers and see, is this feasible? Because what shocked me is that I ended up having a lot more Delta patients than I thought I did. Because I thought, man, like I lost people. We got rid of a bunch of this. But a lot of people stayed and a lot of people backfilled in. And it ended up being, when we ran May over May, we were still 59% Delta. And so I thought, man, I don't know if I can do this.
Don't get cold
59%
feet.
59% Delta.
Don't get cold feet.
Right. No, we're good. We're good. But it was like, I need the team on board. I knew I wanted to do it. I knew my billing coordinator and my patient care coordinator, I knew 100%, like they wanted me out even sooner. We ended up also doing a pretty hefty fee increase in November of last year. And so that helped. But again, then suddenly our write-offs just were going up because we had so many Delta. So we did analysis. It was 59%. And let's see, so May to May, we billed out a little over $1 million, and 32% of the revenue was strictly Delta, 352,000, but I wrote off 592,000.
600 grand.
Just from Delta. Yeah. I said, that's it. Even if we have to get smaller. And so we do team meetings every month. We do, huddles in the morning, and it was, okay, this is the major topic. And what are your thoughts? What makes us different, And we had talked about that, the quality of our office. I started working with a different consultant too, right around 2021, and just getting everybody on the same page, and realizing the value that we had to offer patients, and having those comments all the time. Nobody's ever done an exam like that. Nobody has ever asked questions like that. It was just really positive feedback constantly. And, and there's a dentist on every corner. There's like 3 dentists on every corner. They're everywhere. We know people can go other places, but finally, getting them to understand, we offer something special here, and we're not for everybody, and that's okay. But, we know what we stand for, and we know what we have to offer. And I even kind of gave them, an out, by having that team meeting, what are your thoughts here? What are your concerns? And they were all systems go.
Okay, so
but then I said, okay, so the second half of the year.
Yeah, so January 2023, you that's it. Excuse me. Did you say January 2023? No, you said, January 2024.
That we're going to.
Right.
Yeah, so we're officially going to be out 2024. So we just sent the letter, but we've been working up to that this whole year.
All right, so we have to.
The second half of the year, it's
we have to have a 6-month follow-up podcast. So next year, about May, you got to call me and we got to set this up and we got to have that conversation. So what does it look like now? You made the decision. You're burning the boats. You're going. You have the team rowing the oars in the right direction with you. So there's a true team approach.
Yep.
And where are we at now? Looking good?
So far, so good. It was, it's been a lighter 3 weeks than I would like, but in general, we're good, for the year. I ended up losing an assistant in May or late April, and it took me 5 months to find a really good, solid second person. So just having the one, but the one had been with me, 9 years, and we worked great together. So it's that would have helped, but not necessarily. And then the day that I hired that assistant is when my second hygienist decided to give notice, and she and her husband are going to travel the country for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm, happy for her, but that actually allowed me to restructure the schedule for next year already. So we decided, with the numbers that we had and the projections for next year, that I didn't really need 8 days of hygiene. We really only need 7. So I hired somebody for 3 days a week, and to finish out the year, I have a second person just kind of balancing that 4th day. But we're already looking ahead, kind of condensing and anticipating a little bit of the attrition. And from what patients have expressed, we really think like 50% of them are all in. I'm not going anywhere. I get it. Just tell me what I have to do. 25% are, we don't want to go anywhere. Let's see what this is like. We want to stay. We hope to stay. And then 25, they've just said, oh, we can't. I just can't do it. But even with them, we just say, you know what? We understand you have your own decisions that you have to make in finances, but just know you're always welcome here. We'll always take you back.
Yep.
We care about you, and they appreciate that.
Yep. So my suggestion,
so we'll
my suggestion is going to be, while you're looking at condensing, I think you're also going to have to look at expanding, because there's going to be some dust settling, but I think about this time next year, you're going to be saying, I'm going to need to add certain things because your new patient influx is going to be better. You're going to be making more dollars per service, and you're going to be doing more of the things that you want to do to begin with. And you're going to find that the patients are going to respond. And then like will refer like.
And we talk to them about that too, because they go, we love it here. Well, like attracts like we adore you. We want you here too,
Mm-hmm.
And it is a wonderful atmosphere, So I'm hopeful. Honestly, this is probably the most excited I've been, the most confident with the team that I have, with the communication with the patients. It hurts, because the ones some that say that they're going to have to leave, it surprises you. Some that you maybe kind of want to leave, or you're like, they're not going anywhere, and they stick around. But overall, I have very few patients that I don't care for at this point. We have a wonderful, wonderful group of patients, and I'm gaining, even now as we've transitioned through, just constantly gaining wonderful people, really great people. So,
and they're going to be paying the full freight.
I'm feeling good.
You're dropping all the discount plans, $600,000. For some people, that's an entire practice.
Yeah. Right. It was very eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing too that Delta, they won't even, you can't even put in for a fee increase anymore. They said flat out, nope. We aren't going to negotiate anymore. We will base it on the demographic, and we'll, raise
what that means, right?
Lower accordingly.
What that means is we're going to look at how many people we got signed up, and then if we have enough, the tipping point is in our favor, then tough on you. That's all. Yeah.
Right.
It's a business.
And the good news too is I learned a guy around the corner who has several offices. He's actually. I just learned recently that he's dropping Delta as well. I mean, it's, and there are several top name people in the area. And luckily, like when people look on Facebook, the different community groups, thankfully I'm a person who's constantly mentioned amongst some of these other people. And it's good company to be in. It's really fantastic company. And then it's like, well, then why shouldn't I be also being paid what these people are being paid as well? Because we know that we have a great office.
Everyone
and having a few of these people follow suit.
Yeah, everyone has to make their own decision, right? There's no you do this, so I'll do that. Everyone has to make their own decision what's best for them and their patients and their practice. You've made your decision, And I'm happy for you because you haven't made it in any way easy for yourself. So good for you.
I feel good about it. I'm excited. And it's funny because today, I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy even, I've learned so much. And it has not been an easy road. It still will be challenging. I know that. And I have to remind myself of that, because the slow times will come and you do kind of second guess, or am I doing the right thing? But so many other people are behind me too. And hearing feedback, even from so many of the patients, with the full confidence that, the ones who aren't going anywhere, it really spurs me on. And I go, you know what? Like we learn and we grow and we get better. And
Thank God.
I've learned a lot over the years. And I think my leadership with my team is so much better. The communication, the honesty. I didn't have that early on, and I do now, and it's fantastic.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap right there. I like that. I do have to ask you one last question. Okay. You're a first timer, so you got to tell me if you could go back in time to any place or spot or do anything with anyone, like where would you go?
So, yeah, I knew that this was coming, and it still doesn't make it any easier because I think there's so many time frames to choose from that I think would be fascinating. But truly, I believe I would like to go back when Jesus came here. I would love to listen to him preach and teach and heal, and just to see that and experience that. Aside from the second coming, I think that'd be pretty incredible. I would love to have experienced that.
That's the beauty of that question, is everybody's unique, and I could tell, I had hints of it as you spoke, that may be your thing, and you know what? Good for you. Good for you. Well, going to wrap it all up. Thank you very much for sharing so much, but this is a TBD, though. This is to be determined. We have to follow up because you're going to have a ton of people in your corner.
For sure.
I will put on the show notes if they want to reach out to you or send you a note, because you sent me that, thank you, that bio. I'll share that with our show notes. And thank you very much. If you need a hand or something, you need, I'll be available to help you if you need something. Or if you have an idea and you want a dumb idea, you can ask me. I got plenty of those. So, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee-for-service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee-for-Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.